starting here, there's a poll from the Wall Street Journal and NBC that's getting a lot of attention. It finds that a majority of Americans, including white Americans, believe that American society is racist, is fundamentally, inherently racist. And this, I believe, is the largest number that we've ever seen in these polls. Here's a look at some of the graphs. So 56% say American society is racist, significantly more women than men, but almost half of men, 51%, almost half of men, and then 51% of whites believe this. 78% of blacks, 82% of Democrats, not surprised there. 30% of Republicans, which is actually quite high. Now, I'm not surprised by that either, but that's quite high. 45% of independents. And then if you look at who exactly is supposed to be the target of this racism, the majority, a very sizable majority, say that black people are the ones being discriminated against, also Hispanic, fewer would say Asian. And then it looks to be a little less than 15%, I don't know, 12 or 13% say whites are the ones discriminated against. Now I want to talk about this and talk about what it means. But let me read a little bit from the NBC report on this because it has more information. And I mean, it goes without saying, of course, that the reporting here is wildly biased. But here's what it says. Amid a moment of national reckoning on racial issues and the mourning of one of country's most revered civil rights leaders, new members from the NBC News / Wall Street Journal poll numbers show that American voters have become significantly more aware of racial discrimination and more sympathetic to those protesting to end it, even as the country remains deeply divided over the prevalence of bigotry and its root causes. Okay, notice the bias being worn right on the sleeve here, which is where I prefer for the bias to be worn. I think it's less dangerous when you're just upfront and obvious with it. This is the organization that conducted the poll, but they don't say Americans think our country is racist. Americans believe our country is racist. No, they say Americans are becoming aware that our country is racist. In other words, America is definitely racist, says NBC, but now those dumb Americans are finally catching on. That's the way they're framing this. The poll finds that voters in America are now more likely to say that people of color experience discrimination, to describe athletes kneeling in protest of racial inequality as appropriate, to view the Black Lives Matter movement as a positive force, and to support the removal of Confederate monuments in public spaces. The poll found that a majority of Americans, 56%, say American society is racist. We already went over that. That share is almost unchanged since the Associated Press found 55% of voters saying American society is racist in a July 1988 survey. So we're supposed to believe over 30 years, there's been no progress. Not only is America still racist, but there's been no progress in terms of defeating racism. Even after having a black president for 8 years, no progress. We're still exactly where we were before. 2008, just 28% of voters said the black Americans are discriminated against, while 51% said they are treated fairly. But in this latest poll, the share who believe black Americans experience discrimination has jumped to 59%. And then for the first time, the poll also asked the same battery of questions about the treatment of white Americans. About 3 in 10 voters overall say that white people receive too many special privileges, while 53% say white Americans are treated fairly, and 15% say those being white people, experience discrimination. Now you notice, another thing to notice, how confused the poll respondents are. Nobody has any idea what they're talking about here, or what they think. It's not just they don't have any idea what they're talking about, they don't even know what they think. Because what we take from this is that a large number of people apparently who think that American society is racist in favor of white people also don't think that white people receive any special privileges. The number of people who think that white people receive special privileges is only 30%. Only 30% say whites are specially privileged, while over 50%, 56% was it, say America is racist. You see the disconnect here. There's 26% missing. If America is racist against black people, then we should see that white people receive benefits that black people don't. That would seem to be a necessary aspect of systemic racism. That, in fact, it should be one of the ways that you know systemic racism exists. That should be one of the symptoms, one of the indicators. Yet some of the people, it seems like a large number of people who think that America is racist against blacks don't think that this benefits whites in any way. So it's totally confused. All you have to do is reframe the racism question slightly, and you get a radically different answer. And what that shows you is people, again, it's not just that they don't know what they're talking about, although they don't even know what they really think about these issues. We also know that from what it said before. You look at that ridiculous jump from 2008, 28% of voters said that black Americans are discriminated against in 2008. 12 years later, 59%. Okay? The number has doubled in 12 years. What happened in the last 12 years? I mean, if you didn't think that black Americans were discriminated against on a systemic level in 2008, why would you think it now? What evidence can you marshal? I mean, another way of putting it, what actual evidence, if you are in that number, the 30% of people or so who didn't think that we were systemically racist in 2008, but now you think we are, what evidence did you stumble upon in the last 12 years that changed your mind? Well, I already know the answer to that question. I'll tell you what the evidence is. A small smattering of high-profile cases of black people being killed by the cops. That's it. I mean, that's your evidence. And also, just the chaos in the streets, and it's the other. I think maybe even more than that, the evidence that probably has swayed you is just a lot of people screaming in your face, insisting that America is racist. And finally, you got beaten down and said, okay, fine, it is. And that was enough for you. If I'm wrong, and if there's some other evidence that you came across, some real evidence of systemic racism that changed your mind, then tell me what it is. I don't think you can present it, because I don't think it exists. Let's see. Back to the article. It says, despite the increased recognition of discrimination faced by racial minorities, there it is again, increased recognition of discrimination. The country remains deeply divided on the root causes of racism. 46% of voters say that racism is built into the American society, including into the country's policies and institutions, while 44% say racism is perpetrated only by individuals who hold racist views. Okay. A few things to be said here. So on the issue of Americans thinking America is systemically racist, first of all, America is not systemically racist against black people. That's a myth. I've already explained why it's a myth. I provided the evidence. I'm not going to go into it again. You can go back and watch the shows where I've talked about it. You can read the pieces that I've written, or that many other people have written, addressing this claim. There is no evidence to support the systemic racism claim. And some anecdotes that you have, that's not evidence. Anecdotes to include high-profile, very rare cases of black people being killed by the cops, especially when you consider that in many of those cases, like the Rashard Brooks case, for example, the guy at the Wendy's in Atlanta, or we could go all the way back to one of the first in this at least in the BLM age of Michael Brown, really the one that started it all. In those cases, not only is that anecdotal, but actually the shooting was entirely justified. So how many high-profile cases of unjustified police shootings have there been in the last 5 years? A few. There's been a few. That doesn't prove anything about systemic racism. It doesn't even come close to it, I'm afraid to tell you, especially because, as has been pointed out many times by now, we could also come up with even more examples of unjustified shootings of white people. Not high profile because nobody cares, but they are happening. Okay. In fact, the only example of explicit, official, systemic, state-sanctioned, or even state-mandated racism that I can think of, and again, if you could think of a different one, let me know. The only one I can think of right now is affirmative action. There you have policies that explicitly discriminate against certain groups. They discriminated against whites and also, especially white men, and also Asians. So that is explicit, systemic discrimination. There's an example. Now, if you've got something like that, explicit, state mandated or sanctioned, official, systemic discrimination written into a policy, if you have an example like that which targets Black Americans, then let me know what it is. But I don't think you do have an example or can provide one. But the main thing we should take from this, I think, and keeping in mind that polls can only be trusted so much, and also the groups conducting it are clearly biased, and also polls exist mostly to shape public opinion rather than to gauge it. But even so, all of that in mind, I don't doubt the basic thrust here, that an increasing number of Americans think America is racist, and that number, whatever it is probably over 50%. I buy that. So what we take from that, first of all, the conservative case cannot win, cannot prevail in a culture that sees itself as racist. There is no there's no such thing as a conservatism that also buys into or even entertains this idea of systemic racism. And I'll tell you why. Because conservatism is supposed to be about conserving. If it means anything, it means conserving, defending, maintaining, right? What are we conserving? Well, that's a good question. We should probably figure that out at some point. I would say that we are conserving the nuclear family, we're conserving the sanctity of life, we're conserving the Constitution, we're conserving rationality, we're conserving objective morality, we're conserving Western civilization, and now we're even fighting to conserve basic scientific truths, like the difference between men and women, which is a very important fight as well. The problem is that the BLM set would tell us, have told us, is currently shouting at us, and you can see it on their website if you want. They tell us that all of those things, to include concepts like objectivity, are channels of white supremacy. These are not just relics of white supremacy, these are current active agents of it. The Constitution, nuclear family, all of that is part of the systemic racism problem. Which actually makes sense from their point of view, because if America is inherently, these are things that are inherent to America, to the American identity. And if America is inherently racist, then those things must be as well. So we cannot be successful in conserving these things if the left is successful in painting them as racist, which means that we cannot win as conservatives if the America is racist narrative is winning. It's really one or the other. Right now, it's the other. Right now, they're the ones winning, which means we have our work cut out for us. And it also means, but people ask me all the time, how do we come back from this? How do we reclaim the culture and all that? Well, there isn't any flip we can switch. There isn't any easy 1-2 step plan, 1, 2, 3, follow the steps type of thing. Step-by-step plan for reclaiming the culture. It isn't as easy as that. It also isn't as quick as that. And everyone's looking for the quick fix, immediate, gratification. But that doesn't exist with this. This is a generational fight. This is what I keep saying. It's important for us to realize it's a generational fight. The left has gotten us to this point by infiltrating all of our, major American institutions, the family, academia, media, corporate America. And that's how they've succeeded. They've done it over generations. If we're going to fight back, it's going to be a generational struggle that happens over the long term. We have to sort of buckle up and be ready for a fight that takes that long. And we have to be willing to fight for our kids and our grandkids. And our great grandkids, for people in our families that we'll never meet. We have to be willing to look at it that way. Because if you think you're fighting, if you're an adult in America today and you're fighting because for your own sake, because you don't want to live in a country like this and you want to make it better for you, well, that's understandable. I get that. But it's probably not going to get much better under your watch. This is going to take longer than that to fix. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.